Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, where wisdom is worth spreading. We wish you an enjoyable listening experience. Today, the book we're going to delve into is Beyond Feelings, with the subtitle, A Guide to Critical Thinking. This can be described as a textbook that introduces the art of critical thinking. How to avoid common thinking errors while cultivating critical thinking is a central theme. Many of us have experienced the temptation of Black Friday shopping, with advertisements promoting discounts everywhere. Consequently, we impulsively purchase items we may not even need, such as stockpiling excessive toilet paper and detergent that end up unused and eventually expire, without any significant cost savings. This book addresses the lure of advertising and how people often emphasize feelings and subjectivity while neglecting the importance of thinking. Many individuals spend most of their time without engaging in critical thinking. We know that feelings are subjective reactions, including emotions and desires. Feelings are spontaneous and not consciously controlled. For instance, feeling anger when insulted or fear when threatened are instinctive reactions. These responses are not conscious mental activities. Our feelings can range from positive and noble to negative and malicious. For example, in the 2006 World Cup final, the famous French player Zinedine Zidane headbutted an Italian player in front of billions of viewers. As a result, he was sent off, and France lost the match. Zidane's headbutt was an unwise act driven by malicious feelings, highlighting the unreliability of following one's emotions. Feelings are often unconscious and can lead to unwise behavior. This book tells us that, in contrast to feelings, what we truly need is critical thinking. But what exactly is critical thinking? It's an investigative and problem-solving mode of thought. The process of critical thinking involves continually asking exploratory questions, examining various viewpoints and arguments, and ultimately making informed decisions. This book also emphasizes that our feelings need to be examined, and thinking is the most reasonable and reliable method for doing so. The author of this book, Vincent Ruggiero, is a retired professor from the State University of New York. He dedicated decades to teaching critical thinking in universities, authored textbooks on the subject, and contributed to the establishment of thinking curriculum standards. Originally published in 1975, this book is now in its 9th edition, remaining popular and widely appreciated for over 4 decades. Now that we've covered the basic information about the book and its author, let's dive into the detailed content. This audio will focus on 2 main parts: the common thinking errors many people make during the thinking process, which the book categorizes into over 30 types, and strategies for avoiding these errors and adopting the correct posture for critical thinking. Now, let's take a look at the first part of the content: common errors made during the thinking process. The book discusses over 30 types of errors, and we've selected 3 that are particularly important and widespread to discuss in detail. Let's start with the first one, the egocentric thinking tendency. Each person's thinking is influenced by their upbringing, social environment, educational background, and more. Some aspects of this tendency are deeply rooted in human nature. For example, many people tend to believe that anything associated with them is superior. It's akin to a first grader telling their classmates, "My dad is taller than your dad, my shoes are newer, and my car is faster." As they grow older, they might say things like, "My house is more expensive, and my spouse is more attractive," and so on. In reality, these statements often sound like self-promotion and frequently do not align with the facts. However, this thinking tendency is ingrained in human nature. It often leads us to simplify complex situations and form biased views, believing that only perspectives aligned with our own are positive, while all other viewpoints are negative. This kind of thinking can potentially impact our cognition and even mislead us into making erroneous judgments. For example, when it comes to social issues in Western society, such as neighborhood crime, drug trafficking, or rising food prices, some individuals tend to jump to conclusions based on their preconceived notions. They may associate neighborhood crime with Italians or Spaniards, blame drug trafficking on black people, or hold Jewish people responsible for food price increases. Instead of conducting a comprehensive analysis of specific situations, they draw conclusions solely based on their preferences. Furthermore, each of us can easily be limited by the knowledge and disciplines we've studied when analyzing complex issues. For instance, sociologists may focus on societal conditions, economists on economic conditions, and psychologists on the inner motivations and conflicts of relevant national leaders when examining the causes of a war. However, in reality, wars are highly complex events, and the most meaningful answers typically involve a combination of various factors. Only those who learn to transcend the limitations of their individual academic perspectives are likely to arrive at the most meaningful answers. Do you remember Charlie Munger, the great investor often referred to as Warren Buffett's mentor and partner? They achieved remarkable success together in the world of investing. Recently, there was a book called Poor Charlie's Almanac, which analyzed Munger's methodology behind his investments. In it, Munger mentioned that the core of wealth creation is skilled, interdisciplinary thinking. Interdisciplinary thinking doesn't mean determining which specialized field of knowledge should solve a particular problem. It means applying all methods and principles that can solve the problem, without necessarily confining it to one specific academic field. This approach is quite different from what we often call specialization. Its philosophy aligns with what this book discusses. Excessive specialization can easily lead to bias. To summarize, the egocentric thinking tendency is something that nearly everyone has. Some aspects of this tendency are inherent in human nature, while others are influenced by the limitations of the knowledge and disciplines we've studied. This thinking tendency not only hinders us from recognizing shortcomings in our own thinking but also affects our comprehension and resolution of others' thoughts. Next, let's take a look at the second common error, attacking the critic. This situation is quite common. When you express your opinion on something, and others criticize or question you, do you often feel annoyed and eager to engage in a heated argument to prove your point? If so, you might be prone to committing the error of attacking the critic. Why does this error occur? It's primarily due to a desire to save face. Out of instinct, each of us has a strong need to protect our self-esteem and maintain our self-image, which can lead to mistakes. The practice of attacking the critic typically involves discrediting an opponent to invalidate their ideas or viewpoints. This is a reactionary error. In reality, you're not addressing the issue or the ideas, instead, you're shifting focus towards the critic's motives. You start wondering why they criticized you, and whether you can find faults in their argument. For example, during the Clinton sex scandal, when Paula Jones accused President Clinton of sexual harassment, a spokesperson for Clinton responded by insinuating that Jones' own life wasn't impeccable. Essentially, they were questioning Jones' character. Later, when other women also accused Clinton of harassment, his advisors continued with a strategy of attacking the critics. They claimed that anyone making such allegations must be mentally unstable or leading an imperfect life, and their words couldn't be trusted. Even when Dick Morris, a former Clinton advisor, joined the accusers, current presidential advisors continued to attack the critics. They argued that Morris couldn't be trusted because of his own questionable behavior and his dissatisfaction with losing his White House position. As you can see, committing the error of attacking the critic can easily lead us to overlook the actual issues and focus on the motives of those questioning us, diverting attention away from the core problem. To recap, attacking the critic is often a result of a desire to save face when facing criticism or questioning. In reality, this response doesn't address the actual issues or ideas, it simply shifts focus and leads us away from problem solving. Now, let's move on to the third common error, unwarranted assumptions. Assumptions are merely viewpoints that haven't been subjected to rational examination. For example, when you wake up in the morning to prepare for class, you naturally assume that your watch is functioning correctly, your car will start, and the professor will conduct the class as usual. However, occasionally, unexpected events may occur, like your watch suddenly breaking, your car's battery dying, or the professor being unable to teach due to illness. Nonetheless, these unexpected events don't change your future assumptions because they are based on daily experience, and unexpected incidents are, after all, rare occurrences. So, when are assumptions unwarranted? They become unwarranted when you extend them beyond your personal experience and unreasonably assume they are universally valid. For example, a smoker might assume that smoking doesn't harm the body because, up to that point, smoking hasn't caused any harm. They might simply say, "I've been smoking, and it hasn't harmed me, so it will never harm anyone." This is an unwarranted assumption. Another example could be stock market enthusiasts who assume that all the stock information they find on the internet is reliable, and they base their stock trading decisions solely on this information. These assumptions are unwarranted because the individuals can't prove their validity based on their own experience or specific circumstances. Additionally, there's a famous anecdote about the American novelist Sinclair Lewis. While traveling to England on a ship, he noticed a woman on the deck engrossed in reading one of his novels. Lewis felt a sudden surge of pride and commented to his friend, "Seeing someone so engrossed in reading my work is a wonderful thing." However, to his surprise, at that very moment, the woman threw the book into the sea. This incident demonstrates that Lewis' assumption that the woman enjoyed his writing was unwarranted. Earlier, we discussed the three common errors often made during the thinking process: egocentrism, attacking the critic, and unwarranted assumptions. Besides these three, the book also mentions other errors such as blind conformity, double standards, oversimplification, self-contradiction, and more. However, we won't go into detail on all of them. These errors can occur individually or in clusters. Let's take an example to illustrate how errors can cluster together. Stefan is a college freshman who loves to sleep in. She noticed that 3 days a week, her English class starts at 8 in the morning, which annoys her. On her first day of class, she noticed that the English teacher's name contains Stan, a common Jewish surname. She automatically assumed that the teacher would help her. So, after English class, she found various excuses to stay behind and talk to Mr. Stan, trying to gain his favor. In her first couple of essays, Stefan even emphasized that she is Jewish, hoping to leave a stronger impression on Mr. Stan. Once she felt that Mr. Stan had gotten to know and understand her, she started skipping class and not turning in assignments. As a result, she received an F, failing the English class. Stefan's initial reaction was disbelief, and she confronted Mr. Stan. However, Mr. Stan explained that he had made it clear in the first class that only students who attended class and completed assignments could expect to pass. He expressed regret about her grade but believed it was deserved. After that, Stefan avoided talking to Mr. Stan on campus, and whenever students discussed teachers, she would say, "Mr. Stan is a fraud." In this case, Stefan made at least 3 errors. Let's analyze them one by one. The first error is an unwarranted assumption. She prematurely assumed that anyone with the name Stan must be Jewish, which isn't accurate because many people have that surname and aren't Jewish. So, Stefan's assumption was unwarranted. The second error is egocentrism. Stefan assumed that Mr. Stan, like herself, would naturally have a special affinity for fellow Jews and would be more inclined to help her. This demonstrates egocentric thinking. The third error is attacking the critic. When Stefan received a failing grade, instead of acknowledging her lack of effort, she assumed Mr. Stan deliberately gave her a bad grade. She even attacked Mr. Stan to protect her own ego. In reality, she failed due to her own actions. In real life, countless combinations of errors can occur. The combination of errors can create greater obstacles to critical thinking than any single error. Therefore, understanding the errors we often make can help us avoid these errors, especially when they occur in combination. Earlier, we discussed several common errors in the thinking process. Now let's get specific about strategies to avoid these errors and find the right paths for critical thinking. The book suggests 6 strategies for training critical thinking. 1. Know yourself. The more you understand your strengths and weaknesses, the better you can apply thinking techniques. Create a list of questions about yourself, such as whether you are talkative or reserved, generally optimistic or pessimistic, honest with others, and what factors shaped your personality. Then honestly answer all the questions and reflect on areas where you might be prone to error. When addressing problems, predict which factors might undermine your thinking and consciously resist their influence. For instance, concerning egocentric thinking, be aware of its limitations and always remain vigilant. When faced with issues, respond appropriately, forcing yourself to consider them with a fair mind, and purposefully train your thinking by exposing yourself to unfamiliar matters. Doing so will make you more objective and rational. 2. Sharpen observation. Observe what people say. Usually, what people say and how they say it may reveal their underlying attitudes. By observing facial expressions, language, gestures, tone, you can gauge whether someone's comments are agreeable or opposing. You can determine in which aspects they are sensitive or where their comprehension appears weak, and what communication methods might be effective. For instance, if someone constantly checks their watch while speaking or fidgets with an accessory restlessly or attempts to shift the conversation away from the topic, these behaviors convey a message: they wish to change the subject or discontinue the conversation. By observing these details, you can engage in reflection and make accurate judgments. 3. Choose an issue. Here, an issue refers to any problem on which people are likely to differ. If an issue has 5 or 10 significant aspects, just consider 1 or 2 of them and analyze them thoroughly with sufficient time and effort to practice deep thinking. For example, if you are asked to write about a war, there are undoubtedly numerous angles to explore, and you can't possibly cover them all in a few hundred or thousand words. However, if you choose a specific aspect, such as why a particular incident triggered a war, and delve into it, you can achieve a more profound analysis. 4. Investigate. Seek answers to the problem by researching the issue and collecting information to help form conclusions. Investigation involves 2 aspects: investigating facts and investigating opinions. For instance, if you're wondering which income group in the United States is treated most unfairly by the current federal tax laws, you would need to examine the provisions of the tax laws, fact investigation. Simultaneously, you'd seek insights from tax experts about why this income group is being treated unfairly and how this situation could be improved, opinion investigation. 5. Form judgments. Forming judgments means evaluating evidence, reasoning carefully, and arriving at conclusions, the results of your thinking. To make sound judgments, you need to assess the evidence you've acquired, determining what's relevant, what's irrelevant, and how to reconcile conflicting pieces of evidence. 6. Persuade others. After forming judgments, effectively express your viewpoint so that those without a stance on the issue may agree with you, and those who disagree might reconsider their perspectives. This broadens the benefits of critical thinking. By combining these 6 strategies in a logical sequence, you can comprehensively apply critical thinking. Let's analyze an example to understand how to approach the topic of juvenile delinquency. People have always treated juvenile delinquency differently, emphasizing the opportunity for young offenders to reform rather than punishing them, especially in court. Charges against juveniles differ from those against adults. For instance, when a teenager commits an assault, it's often considered a case of negligence rather than intentional harm or murder. The handling and procedures of such cases also vary. For instance, hearings are preferred over trials, records are sealed rather than made public, and juveniles are given guidance instead of imprisonment. However, in recent years, there has been growing public dissatisfaction, with many demanding that juvenile offenders be treated as criminals, regardless of their age. So, the question arises, should juvenile offenders be treated like adult criminals? To answer this, we can apply the 6 strategies for critical thinking we discussed earlier. First, know yourself. Understand whether you tend to be optimistic or pessimistic and what your stance is on this issue, along with any supporting evidence. Regardless of your position, you need a comprehensive understanding of information related to both sides of the argument and engage in mindful observation. Observation involves noting the attitudes, viewpoints, and evidence presented by people with different perspectives. Pay attention to details and identify discrepancies among various sources. For example, observe how accused juveniles react in court. Are their actions impulsive, influenced by others, or carefully planned? Have they recognized their mistakes and shown remorse? Accumulating this information through observation, you can then choose 1 or 2 main issues for in-depth exploration. For instance, let's explore the reasons behind juvenile delinquency and the age at which they should be held accountable. The reasons behind juvenile delinquency are multifaceted, involving political, economic, cultural, legal, educational, and moral factors. It also extends to family, school, and societal influences. There are subjective factors related to a juvenile's psychology and character, as well as complex objective factors like inadequate education, negative social environments, and insufficient cognitive abilities. Regarding the age of accountability, it's essential to consider when a young person can comprehend the moral and legal nature of their actions. Is it fair to hold them accountable if they are very young and lack this understanding? At what age does a person generally develop this comprehension? Answers to these questions can be drawn from fields such as education, psychology, medicine, ethics, and law. After thorough investigation, you can form your conclusions. Regardless of your viewpoint, you can express it to persuade others. When persuading, follow some guiding principles: start from common ground, maintain a positive attitude, make your argument understandable, acknowledge valid points from opposing views, and avoid using irrational or irrelevant arguments. Your viewpoint may not satisfy everyone, but these improvements can prompt society, schools, families, and young individuals themselves to reflect and work towards reducing or preventing juvenile delinquency. If your expression can inspire change in action, your presentation becomes persuasive, and your thinking becomes meaningful. In summary, learning critical thinking typically involves following 6 strategies: know yourself, observe actively, choose a divisive issue, practice deep analysis, explore reasons, form judgments, and persuade effectively. Alright, we've covered a lot of ground today, so let's briefly summarize. Today, I've shared 2 main parts of the content with you. The first part focused on 3 common errors we tend to make in our thought processes: egocentrism, attacking critics, and baseless assumptions. The second part involved consciously training our critical thinking skills, with 6 strategies to consider: knowing ourselves, keen observation, selecting a topic, conducting research, forming judgments, and persuading others. That concludes today's content. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker Channel audiobook channel. Give it a thumbs up and share it with your family and friends. Wisdom is worth spreading, paving the way for a better future. Thank you, and goodbye.